chilly one this morning. There was a hard freeze warning in place for Springdale last night, this morning. I think it was about 28 degrees or so when I pulled up on the truck. That's made setting up on this composition behind me here a little more of a challenge than usual. Just because when it's that cold and you're under the dark cloth, everything condensates. You know, even if you hold your breath, just your head being in the dark cloth warms it up enough where it starts to condensate on the ground glass. You got to keep wiping it. And, it's kind of a challenge to work with, but I think I got it. So I'm set up on a composition that I actually shot last night. I took one exposure on Velvia. Not sure that Velvia was the best choice, but that's all I had in my film holder, so that's what I shot. But last night it was all overcast. No blue skies at all. Forecast showed it was supposed to clear in the afternoon, and it never really did. Not 100% anyway. Got a little bit of sun here and there, but not enough to get any kind of warm light down in here in this composition. But with all that water that came through, it left the wash really clean. So all the sand and stuff that's in the foreground here in the wash is new. You know, it's all been reset. No footprints in it or anything. Looks really good. Unfortunately, there was more water in it than there is this morning because it's drained out quite a bit. And I was kind of worried that those conditions weren't going to last. So I did take an exposure just to have it. But now this morning I'm back because I've got blue skies, completely blue, no clouds anywhere. And now all the cliffs behind me are lit up in this morning light that's bouncing light back into this cliff face here. And it's glowing a little bit. It's not as strong as I kind of hoped it would be, but the reflected light is there. So I've gone ahead and set up on it again with my 75 millimeter Fujinon f5.6. And what I'm framing here is there's a bunch of sandstone slick rock here in the foreground that's got these lines that kind of point down into the wash, which I think are really cool. That's what grabbed my attention as I was coming by. But then in the smack dab in the middle, there's this beautiful display of fall color that I'm photographing too. Some of the leaves that are off on this tree on the right here are a little sparse, but that's okay because I kind of like how it shows the branches. There is a pool of water that's on the right here that I've included in my composition. And it's got some leaves that have fallen off of this tree here and that have landed on the sandy bank over here on the opposite side of this pool. I'm a little concerned there's an evergreen tree right here that I've had to chop off. Just that there's no way to include it in the composition. But I was careful to try to make sure the top of this maple here didn't get cut off weirdly. But it is pretty sparse. There's just twigs up there. There's not really any leaves left on it. So it's not a lot to look at, but I wanted to make sure that it didn't leave the top of the composition awkwardly with that. So I've taken one exposure on Provia 100F. And I've got my film holder flipped and waiting to take the next frame to see if maybe I get any better light. Not sure it's going to get much stronger. This corner of the wash is kind of protect the sun's behind it. So it's going to be quite a ways before it gets any stronger up here. And when it does, it'll probably spill direct sunlight in the composition. So this might be the best it gets for now. But I'm camping on it just in case, see if anything changes. And if not, I'll just shoot that second frame to have a backup. And my settings were 1 second at f22. And I am under stark blue sky right now. And I'm in the shade. So I went ahead and put my 81B warming filter on, which adds 2/3 of a stop. Now this tree that's right next to me, I can see the very top of it is starting to get direct sunlight, which means the sun is about to come up over the top of this peak, light everything up behind me in direct sunlight. So I'm going to start paying attention to this and see if I can time my next frame to be just the right moment. It's always the goal, right?
So here are the two Provia images. And even with the 81B warming filter applied, both of these still have quite a bit of blue cast, which isn't a terrible surprise. But what was a surprise was the Velvia image shot the night before. Of course, the Provia images show more foreground since they were taken at 75 millimeters as opposed to the 90 millimeters that the Velvia image was taken with. And I do like having the extra leading lines in the foreground here, but the color on the Velvia image is just much better. And there's more water in the foreground wash on the evening exposure, which isn't present on the morning exposures on Provia. The morning exposures did capture more glow on the background sandstone, but the natural vignette from the evening exposure I think helps focus your eye towards the maple more, which is more of the subject. The wider Provia shots also included this evergreen tree on the border, which looking at now I think is a little awkward, in addition to this box elder tree, which is a little bit of a distraction, and I like the way the Velvia image just includes that more. Ultimately, although I wish the Velvia image had just a little bit more of that foreground element, I still think it scores more points than the Provia images even without that. So that's the one I processed. But I'm curious to know your thoughts and which one you preferred. So as always, let me know down in the comments what you think. And here's my edit.
One of the great things about getting all that rain and having the washes flow with water the other day is that it leaves behind a pristine wash. It just resets everything. And one of the things you see a lot of after the washes have drained is these sand ripples, like mud or sand ripples. So I've had my eye kind of looking out as I've been kind of walking around the day after the storm now, kind of looking for things that might be of interest to try to set up on. I think I found something. These sort of pattern shots with these sand ripples and fall leaves in them, are pretty popular. I've seen a lot of them like that. This one, I'm kind of doing my own take on this, where I didn't pick the most pristine part of the sand ripples. I actually picked the part that has more like pebbles and rocks kind of poking through, because I thought that was more interesting to look at. But more than that, there is what looks to be a box elder leaf that fell here. And yeah, it's not a grand, awesome, red maple leaf or something like that, but I'll take it. Wabi-sabi, except the imperfections. Now, what's really making this possible to shoot here is right behind me there's this big slick rock sandstone bank here that's directly in sunlight. So it's bouncing light over here into these mud ripples, and that's actually what made me stop and look for something on here, because there's been several patches of mud ripples, but you can just see the difference when you walk by when there's reflected light and it's glowing a little bit. It just looks so much better. And I need all the help I can get on this one, because I'm shooting Velvia 50 and I'm not using a warming filter. It is in the shade, a bright blue sky in here, and these are the conditions that really lead to blue film if you're not careful. And this may turn a little blue too. I'm sure these white pebbles that are reflecting sky color will probably turn blue in that image. But my hope is that with the reflected light, that kind of counteracts it with the warm peach tones in the sand and gives you some color contrast. So I'm kind of hoping that the shadows will be a little cooler and maybe the highlights will be warmer. That's what I'm hoping for. We'll see how it turns out. Now, in regards to that leaf, I didn't originally place that. Full disclosure, it was there. That's actually why I decided to set my camera up specifically here, is because of that. But I had it framed up and I was focusing on it, and then a breeze came through the wash and it blew it a couple inches away. So rather than break down and just say, forget it, I put it back, and by that time the deed's already done. So I went ahead and straightened it. I tried. As far as the camera goes, you can see you got it pointing straight at the ground, which means I had to extend the bellows quite a ways in order to get it to focus. And that actually gave me a 1/3 extra exposure in order to compensate for the bellows length. But then I took one exposure on Velvia 50, and that exposure was 2 seconds at f32. I think that's the only exposure I'm going to take, just because I had one random sheet left in a film holder, and I kind of wanted to get that out of there so I could load all new fresh film. But I'm also pretty confident in my metering in this one, because I actually metered this one off of a gray card. So especially being as close to my subject as I am, and I'm in the same light, it's really easy just to take a gray card reading, and that's your exposure. So I'm hopeful that as I'm exploring, I'll see more of this kind of stuff. So don't be too surprised if you see several of these sort of compositions, because I may be trying different iterations and different combinations of things, just seeing if I can get the one that I really like. But in any case, it's always fun to shoot this kind of stuff. I don't know why, but I always enjoy pointing right at the ground. But hopefully that exposure turned out. But for better or worse, here's a look at the film sheet.
Overall, Velvia did go pretty blue in this image, as I kind of suspected it might. But I don't think it's a bad look on this image. Some of the blue cast in the rocks is a little strong and may dial that back just a bit. But the boosted magentas in the sand I think looks pretty good, and I like how the blue in the shadows contrast with the yellows in the leaf. Unfortunately, I had noticed this tree seed in the composition, or I might have tried to remove that, so that's something I may try to do in post. I do like the overall diagonal flow from top to bottom with the ripples in the sand, and I intentionally adjusted the leaf to be more vertical in the frame to contrast with that. I might have preferred to have this one rock further up towards the top corner, but adjusting my framing in order to accomplish that would have decentralized this leaf just a little bit and upset the diagonal flow of the ripples in the sand. So in the moment, I decided that those two elements were more important, and I compromised on the rock. There were some delicate water droplets on the leaf, which was my point of focus, but I was happy to see that depth of field managed to capture everything else perfectly sharp. I was also being careful to make sure the top left and bottom right corners weren't overly crowding the corners of the frame, since that's where your eye naturally flows with the ripples in the sand. And I let the rest of the composition kind of be chaos and take care of itself. But here's my edit, and as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks as always for watching this week's episode, and shout out to my Patreon patrons. Your support is appreciated, and thank you for helping us support the creation of more videos like this one. You can let me know if you enjoyed this video by hitting that like button down below, and if you want to make sure you don't miss the rest of the videos from my Zion trip, consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks again, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.